Hi everyone. Welcome back to another out of the box live. Oh, it just changed my screen on me. Let me find where it went. Okay, here we go. So as you probably have noticed, I hope you're enjoying also the switch up of this season, having two different alternating segments. Of course, the live like this with me here on Tuesdays at 4, and then sometimes the on location out of the box abyssal of history segments. So check those out. They should be in all of our different videos and shared to all the good history places. And this week I have on one big thing on my mind, and that is the Jewish History Detectives lecture, which is happening next week. I'll be sharing lots more information about that. And I'm wrapping up the work on that. Hello, Alan Lowen. Nice to see you. Nice to have you here with me live. And so almost done with that lecture, wrapping up, getting started with all of the fun images that I'll be showing you and the PowerPoint and that kind of thing. So I'm very excited to share that with you next week. I added all of the information for that event into the caption, so all you need to do is register, free and open to the public, thanks to the generosity of the Jampel family. And this year, Wednesday, November 3rd at 7 p.m., a week from tomorrow, I'll be presenting on anti-Zionism in the Reform Movement, behind the scenes of a divided Detroit. And we'll be looking at the primary sources that tell a very interesting story about Zionism and anti-Zionism here in Detroit, and how it really impacted the Reform community at the time and dictated what would be its future. The presentation will piece together correspondence, board minutes, sermons, all different kinds of primary sources that will help shed light on this kind of talked about but not always really talked about topic that happened here in the 40s. So with that in mind, I thought it might be nice to take a little teeny piece of that story that I'll be telling next week, and that I couldn't really go as deep into because, of course, it's an hour-long lecture and you can only cover so much, but that it would be the history of Isaac Mayer Wise here in Detroit, and I'll explain more. So Isaac Mayer Wise is thought of as like the father of the American Reform movement. His tireless work helped unite a new and growing movement in America with the founding of institutions like the United American Hebrew Congregations, United UAHC, now the URJ, the Union for Reform Judaism, Hebrew Union College, which is the rabbinical seminary, Central Conference of American Rabbis, the CCAR, which is like the Reform Rabbis' legal governing body. And all of these like centralizing organizations were a result of Wise's advocacy and work for the movement. And so Wise himself isn't such a big part of next week's talk, but those institutions I mentioned definitely will play a part in what we talk about next week. So safe to say, he was a big deal, especially in helping to establish the branch of Judaism that so many Americans practice today. With that said, he spent most of his career in what is really like the first reform hub in the States, which would be Cincinnati. It's where the main campus of HUC is, Hebrew Union College, but of course he traveled and spoke and worked with rabbinic students, and had great relationships all over. One of those connections was Detroit. Not so far, I guess, from Cincinnati as far as like Midwest things go. And Detroit was also an early home to American Reform Judaism, which gained popularity in the country in the mid to late 1800s. We'll talk about more next week. I won't spoil too much, but today we'll talk more about the roots that were started here in Detroit, in Temple Beth El. So Wise admired many of Temple Beth El's rabbis, was admired by many of Temple Beth El's rabbis, which is really evident in the papers and tributes written to and about him. But for whatever reason, there's this description of Isaac Mayer Wise from a Detroit trip that he took here, and it's written in the Detroit Free Press. They don't have the author of the article, but I'm going to share it with you. It's a really interesting way to describe someone. It's particularly sweet in its description, and will really give a glimpse into Wise's visits here, one of Wise's visits. It's from July of 1889, and the article is titled "The American Hebrews, the First Day's Meeting of the Council is an Entertaining One," which already sounds interesting. Then it says, "The Council of the Unions of American Hebrew Congregations met yesterday at Oddfellows Hall." So I believe, and I think I mentioned this later, that this is kind of like the precursor to biennial, or it appears to be. "It would be difficult matter indeed," he says, "to get," or she, but probably he, times, "to gather together 150 more intelligent-looking men than those who have come to Detroit as delegates to this convention." Simon Havenrich of Detroit was appointed the temporary chairman, and he assured the delegates that they were welcome visitors here in Detroit. Then we get a little Bethel representation. Dr. Louis Grossman of this city delivered a happy address of welcome to the delegates and took occasion to eulogize the Union and its works. He also paid splendid tribute to Reverend Dr. Isaac Wise, the venerable president of the faculty of the Union Hebrew College of Cincinnati. But then we get a super sweet, detailed description of Isaac Mayer Wise at this Detroit meeting. It says, "Rabbi Wise of Cincinnati made his appearance. Dr. Wise had no sooner entered the room than he was greeted with a burst of enthusiastic applause, which testified convincingly enough in what estimation he is regarded by his brethren. One glance at Dr. Wise's face reveals the man. It is a strong one, yet within a gentle one. The features denote a refined nature and resolute character. Dr. Wise only recently celebrated his 70th birthday, and there still lingers in the expression of his dark eyes a good deal of poetry of youth softened by the mellowness of age." It continues, and I'll continue, but already it's like, I have never read an article in the Free Press that is just so detailed in its description of someone's face when they walk in the room. It goes on. "Dr. Wise wears a heavy mustache and short side whiskers," which is exactly how I picture all the pictures of him, "which are only slightly touched with silver. His hair, however, is much grayer." Wow, yes, I see. I think that was Debbie talking for Temple Bethel. Wow, indeed, the way that they are describing him. Yes. So Wise was not the only one to have his face actually described in this article, but this person really goes into like poetic detail about the feeling and the look of this man when he walks into the room, where others get more of like a so-and-so had a shaven face, but like not this kind of thing. Then after introducing Wise, the writer goes on to describe the drama of the council's meeting, and the hottest topic was the fact that they were meeting in the summer. Yes, that is a pun. Some in the council wanted to change the date of their every other year meeting, aka the original biennial, I think, but others wanted to keep this date in the summer. And one argued that, quote, "It's a shame to bring us together in this hot weather unless the very life of the order depends upon it," to which he got a round of applause. And I can also imagine, like, July in Detroit, no air conditioning sounds absolutely horrible. But then they voted to change it to March, and then people kept debating until apparently someone had to finally stand up and say, "I think you two men," who were still arguing about the date, "must have lost your senses. Why in the name of God did you start this rumpus?" And then it ended. So I just love the idea of like the way that this article starts with describing these like super refined, intelligent men just like getting super upset about not only whether or not they should change the date, but the fact that people are arguing about it to begin with. And I love the quotes in here. It's really just like, I feel like I'm there in 1889. But the meeting ended and Bethel hosted a social at the Phoenix Club, of course, and they all enjoyed their time in Detroit. So Isaac Mayer Wise, very well described here, was not only beloved by the writer, but he touched the lives of many, really, including Rabbi Franklin, who was Grossman's, who was there, the successor, the next senior rabbi here at Temple Bethel. And as many of us probably know who've been on the journey of out of the box, he was here for over 40 years. But just a year after arriving here, Wise passed away in 1900. And Rabbi Franklin wrote a very, very nice tribute to him, which was like published and administered everywhere. And here is just a few things about what he said about Wise. Here was the prophet with soul as great as Isaiah's, whose heart beat responsive to every pulsation of the great heart of humanity, whose eye, gifted with prophetic penetration, lifted the curtain of the unborn years, and seeing, whose voice was so sweet that old men wept before its music and children dried their tears. So it really is not so far off from the writer of the Detroit Free Press article. Franklin really admires and lifts up Wise's presence in the world, this time really talking about his effect on people. But it's just really interesting the way that people talk about Isaac Mayer Wise as this true presence. Franklin goes on with more biblical comparisons. He was a leader with the courage as great as Moses. He was the teacher as great as Solomon. He was an organizer as great as great an Ezra, who gathered scattered forces and linked them into union, strong and staunch, which makes sense because of the work he did to really create a centralized reform movement in America. Franklin continues to admire Wise's strength and leadership as a pioneer of American Judaism, Reform Judaism, and of course, he applauded his patriotism. He loved the stars and stripes as few have loved them, and he was the first to pronounce the banner call echoed after him in every Reformed Jewish pulpit of this land: America is our Canaan, Washington is our Jerusalem. And I just got a great segment about Armor. Thank you, Debbie. So this call that Franklin's talking about from Wise, saying he's super patriotic, he's the one who started the idea America is our Canaan, which sometimes is read as or repeated as America is our Zion, Washington is our Jerusalem, really was, like he said, the banner call of the early reform movement, which will definitely come into play next week. And just closing out, Rabbi Franklin again lists the ways in which Wise was so special to so many people, not only in his congregation, but like the city of Cincinnati. You could just like walk into the city of Cincinnati and ask someone on the street how they felt, and they would give this very emotional response. Or according to Franklin, that's what might happen. And he ends with, such a man can never die. He sits enthroned among the world's immortals, blessing us with the sweetness of his memory as he blessed us in his pure life. And so with that, I think I've laid a bit of a teaser, maybe, for the Jewish History Detectives lecture next week, Wednesday, November 3rd at 7 p.m. Here we've laid a little bit of foundation. We'll definitely go into it more about the early reform movement, some of its ideals, its American patriotic value of patriotism, and the idea that America is our Zion. We'll talk more about that next week. And how Detroit was deeply rooted in this era of the movement and beyond. So hope to see you all. There is, again, link in the description here of the video. And if nothing else, I'll also hope that you catch us for, even before next Wednesday, for Out of the Box Abyssal of History, which will be 4 p.m. next Tuesday. So all good things happening next week in the world of Jewish archives here in Michigan. Take care.